Hey folks, Dustin Moret here, and I'm recording this video just after watching the grand finals take place for the Season 1 Pro League for ESL and ESEA, and of course it was Cloud9 taking on Fnatic in a best of 5, and of course in this situation Fnatic was the heavy favorite, being the number 1 ranked team in the world. Cloud9, a team not even really in the top 10 coming into this event based on some of the results that we have been seeing out of them, prior to this event. Of course, with this 5, this is only the 3rd LAN that they've attended, and of course, they've had a lot of North American online league play and tournament play, but against international teams, this is only the 3rd time we've seen them faced with this scenario with this 5. The first 2 times certainly did not go as planned, losing out on group stages in those previous 2 events, but then this event, they make a huge leap forward. Being able to take on Envious in the best of 1, though losing the Virtus Pro, still coming out, getting in the quarterfinals, rematching Envious, winning that best of 3 2-0, then going on to play their North American rivals CLG, or one of their North American rivals at least, not having any trouble there, tooling that quite easily, and then moving on to the Fnatic Grand Finals, which we're about to talk about right now. And basically what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the Grand Finals itself, the maps, the matches, what went on, provide a little bit of historical context here on what this actually means and for NA basically as a whole. And then I want to focus on what this means for the outlook of Cloud9 going forward, because obviously they still have a lot more tournaments to play over the next few weeks. They're about to move on to play in ESWC. Then after that, they'll be playing at DreamHack Valencia, and then the whole Face It DreamHack merger LAN. Then, of course, they have the CEVO finals directly after that with MLG. And then after that, they're going to try to qualify for the next major at the, qualifiers there in Burbank, California. And then if they do qualify, then they will be playing that major, which they are, of course, a heavy favorite to do so. They still have a lot of tournaments to play, especially going into ESWC next, where there's really only, I guess, 2 top 10 teams in attendance there if you don't include Cloud9. No, I guess Keat Stars would be considered pretty up there, or pretty close to top 10 as well. But, of course, Navi and NIP are going to be there as well. A lot of the other top teams have dropped out, such as TSM, Fnatic, some of these other teams. So this puts a lot of breathing room out there for Cloud9 to continue to have some success with some, top place finishes going forward, which is certainly big for them, because obviously having one big result isn't going to be enough to rank you very, very highly, near the top 4 or whatever. You need multiple kind of performances to match up to some of the other teams that are already up there who have been consistently doing things like this. Maybe not making finals, but making top 4 quite close to it. So it's very important that they want to beef up their resume, that they have to kind of keep this trend going forward. And so we'll kind of talk about that as well. So just going into the finals, like I said, obviously Fnatic a heavy favorite. It's a best of 5. We know Fnatic's map pool is very, very deep. I mean, when you look at these maps, obviously just, known for being strong on Inferno, which would have been the map played had Dust 2 have been won by Cloud9. Obviously just can play the whole map pool quite well. I mean, really, really known for their Cobble, obviously, definitely very much well known for their Inferno, as I've already said. Their Mirage also quite good that they did drop it this tournament. They obviously very formidable opponent on Cash as well. So basically they can really just play the whole pool. I mean, the only maps that they don't have a whole lot of play on are like Train, which is a map they've only played 3 times, but they've won it all 3 times, though, of course, in close games, including one overtime. So basically they can play the whole map pool, and that makes it tough, because when you think about Cloud9, yes, they can play Cash, yes, they can play Dust 2, yes, they've played some close games on Overpass, so we know we have capabilities there, and then obviously Train has been a map for them as well, but obviously Inferno has been a struggle for them, especially when you're going against Fnatic. You got to think about Cobblestone. Of course, now we know that they can play it quite well, but it wasn't necessarily a heavy map for them in the past, so we kind of worried about Cobblestone, worried about Inferno, and worried about Mirage. So it just seemed like Fnatic's map pool was going to be much bigger. When you're playing a best of 5, where there's not as many bans, in fact, each team only got 1 ban, but the way this system worked, each team got to pick 1 map, so 2 maps were already decided before anyone got to place the ban. So this was, of course, this even seemed to favor Fnatic even more, though Fnatic was kind of the one that complained about the veto system, whereas I felt like it favored them most. Now, of course, in hindsight, now we've seen the result, we've seen the matches, and I just wanted to put this in historical context. So, obviously, the only 2 remaining members from Complexity days on this team would be Sean Gares and Nothing, of course, and the last time they had beat a European team in a best of 3 period or not period, I guess, like on EU soil. Obviously, you look at some of the ESEA lands where they've had, wins against NIP and Navi and Virtus Pro. I think that was the season 16 ESEA land. Um, so they've had it on North American soil, but on European soil, the last time they had done it was against Astana Dragons, and that was the original major DreamHack winner 2013. That was back in November of that year, where they took a top 4 finish at the event because of that. And a North American team in general hadn't beat EU teams in a best of 3 ever since iBuyPower had done it against LDLC at Face It back in October of 2014. Back when it was like, Dazed and Steel and those guys over there at iBuyPower. Of course, both those guys can't even play right now. So it's been a drought, is my point. And, going into this, it was always going to be tough for Cloud9, but they had beaten Envious in a best of 3, so they had already passed that hurdle, basically. And now it was time to play the best of 5 against Fnatic. So let's kind of talk that through, talk about the game, some of the moments there, and then talk about what this means for Cloud9's outlook going forward, as I said. So the first map was Cobblestone. This was a map that everyone kind of wrote off for Fnatic, including myself. I won't lie, I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I knew this was going to happen. No, of course not. The numbers didn't really favor Cloud9 at all. When you think about Fnatic had only lost the map 1 time out of 9 plays, and that was against TSM in the Fragbite Masters finals just last month in June. But other than that, they had been just monsters on Cobblestone. And even looking at Cloud9's just North American online league play, they had never really been known for being like a crazy Cobble team. Like I said, Cash, Dust 2. I guess in Inferno in the North American scene, they've been really, that's probably been their best map, actually. They obviously ban Mirage quite a lot. They weren't particularly known for Cobblestone, to be honest. But yeah, Overpass, D2, Cash, and then, like I said, Inferno, those were like the big maps we had been seeing them play in the NA scene quite well leading up to some of these international events. And so that's kind of what we thought about. So when you see Cobblestone, because Cloud9 doesn't get to ban anything before picks come out, and so Fnatic just jumps on Cobblestone. It's a perfect pick. You think this is going to be, a rough game, but no, it's not. I mean, Cloud9 come off with the 3-0 start. They look good all the way through the T side. They come up with 7 rounds, which, granted, I mean, I guess looking at like the meta of the map, T side, you kind of want to get closer to double digits than 7, but that's still a pretty respectable score when you go up against Fnatic. And given that this isn't like a huge map for Cloud9, they had some really good plays. It is overall they played well. And then on the CT side is where it mattered. They pulled out 9 rounds on CT side to win this match, 16-14. So a very, very close victory here for Cloud9. I mean, Shroud drops a 30 bomb this game. He's plus 15 on it. Skadoodle, 26 kills, plus 8. You look at the rest of the team, Sean Gares, Freakazoid, nothing, and all in the high teens. So really just an all-in-all team effort here, but obviously Shroud and Skadoodle were the heavy hitters, especially on CT side. Skadoodle had some crazy rounds with the multi-frags. They had some crazy clutches together. I think there was like this really one big clutch that Shroud and Skadoodle put together, retaking the B-bomb site. That was really big on the CT side, if I remember correctly. So just crazy stuff to see Cloud9 take this map and get the 1-0 start. That was just a big statement and an incredible game from Cloud9, though it definitely came down to the wire. I mean, it was a close game, let's be real. They had a big lead, but, they got it done, and that's what matters the most, right? So moving on from that, we did have to go on to map number 2, which was going to be... it was going to be Cash. Now, this was Cloud9's pick. This is a map we saw them play and beat Envious on twice this tournament already. Plus, they played them a pretty damn close game as well at the last Gfinity event, the Summer 1 event. And so when you kind of think about it that way, you think this could be a 2-0 start for Cloud9. This looks really, really good. This is kind of crazy we're seeing this happening. It's the best team in the world, but... it just doesn't happen. Fnatic comes out with 12 rounds on the T side in the first half, just absolutely slaughters Cloud9 for the most part here. No one plays particularly well for C9, though, I mean, they all played pretty close together, so once again, kind of an equal team effort. They really didn't have the economy to do much on CT side, to be honest, just because they were getting slaughtered. You couldn't really get Skadoodle the op very much. When they did, you could definitely tell that Cloud9 were trying to kind of adjust for the fact that Fnatic had been scouting them. So typically they're known for their 1-3-1, Skadoodle anchoring the A-bomb site with the opt and kind of your aggression with nothing, Freakazoid and Shroud and mid and Sean kind of anchoring B. Don't get me wrong, they don't always do it that way. Sometimes Sean will anchor A while, Skadoodle picks with the op at B. They like to move his op around. This is kind of their CT setup, but they love the 1-3-1 particularly. But I think there was only a couple of rounds where Skadoodle actually did anchor A with the op, which is what he does a vast majority of the time. Now, granted, as I said, they didn't have the economy to do this for most of it, just because of they were getting crushed. But it was just odd. Like, you didn't see him do it until late, and it worked late, but it took too long for them to get to doing something like that, which was uncharacteristic of the team. But you could just tell the reason why was because they were trying to give Fnatic a different look, knowing that the scouting had come in. Maybe they over-adjusted. Maybe they didn't play their own game enough. I think the economy was just a huge factor here most of the game for them. And they just kind of get wiped this game, 16-6. So this was a huge loss to take, huge loss. Didn't really even have a chance this game. But they recover in a huge way whenever we go over into Overpass. At least to a degree, right? They obviously lose the series 1-3. We already talked about the one map which they won, which is the one map we didn't think they would get, which was Cobblestone. But then on Overpass, I mean, this was such a heartbreaker game. I mean, Cloud9 able to put up 9 rounds on the CT side. They actually looked pretty damn good overall. Then on T side, it comes down to the wire. I mean, in this game on Overpass, at one point, they were up like 13-7, 13-8, something like that. So they had a lead, coming onto that T side after what they had accomplished on CT and then swapping over. And they just couldn't close out the game. There was just so many heartbreaking rounds, but really the key round that I can remember off the top of my head was this 3v2 post plant hold for Cloud9 where Freakazoid's inside the site. Skadoodle has the op at Sandbags, and I think it was Sean Gares or Nothing was playing over towards the tunnel, the long tunnel in the back. And I can't remember who was retaking from Fnatic, 2 players that were left, but they win the retake, and then that just kind of ruined Cloud9's money and morale, and it just was a downward spiral from that point forward. Like, up until that point, up until they lost that 3v2, everything was looking like Cloud9 could actually close the game, because that was a very winnable 3v2, and I think that would have put them to 14. So then just one round away from a map point, all of a sudden you're tying up the series, or you're taking a lead in the series 2-1, right? So that was just heartbreaking to see that happen. There was several kind of close rounds like that if they just would have gone Cloud9's way when they had that lead with 13-8 or 13-7 or whatever it was, it could have been a so much different game. And even then they still grind it close to a 16-14, but really that was a huge round to lose. And you could approach it from different angles. Should Freak have just shoulder peeked and not committed in that? Should his teammates have backed him up more? Should Skadoodle have really had the op at long instead of Sandbags, where it's much more difficult to do anything with the op? But then if you swap his op over to long and you bring Nothing to short, does that leave Freakazoid alone for too long inside the site? There's so many woulda, coulda, shoulda factors that you can inject into this when you're analyzing it. But the bottom line is from that point forward, the game kind of spiraled out of control, and it was a good game. Once again, Shroud really stepping up. I mean, he's been huge this whole tournament. He's been top fragging for them a lot of games. If it wasn't Skadoodle doing it, then it was Shroud, or he was second, or he was definitely in the top 3. I mean, there was a couple of occasions where Freakazoid really broke out, for instance, against Envious, where Shroud was a little bit more quiet. But overall, Shroud just played an absolutely great tournament, and so did Skadoodle. The trio looked good with Nothing as well, and Freakazoid actually had a big map here on Overpass as well. He was the second best fragger on the team, 22-22. He had some big plays. I remember one particular round on the CT side where it was him and Shroud clutching and on a retake on the A bomb site, and Freakazoid was like pushing the bathrooms and pushing and just turning the round upside down, just making huge plays, and put Shroud in a 1v1 situation against Olaf Meister, which Shroud won, and that actually won him around the CT side. So that's just like one play I remember, but in general he played quite well. And so Cloud9 looked good this game. They were so close to getting it, like I said, they had the lead, they just couldn't close, right? Then we move on to Dust 2, which is, of course, the final map of the series. And, man, once again, Cloud9 off to a great start. They get a 10-5 half here from the T side. Now, Freakazoid was struggling this game. There's no question about it. But you're looking at Shroud and Skadoodle. They were playing absolutely phenomenal Counter-Strike. I mean, I remember this one round where Shroud had a scout, and I think either aced or got a quad kill round that was just ridiculous. Like, I know we're going to see that in a bunch of frag movies coming out. Like, just a ridiculous round. And just in general, Skadoodle and Shroud played so well. Shroud dropped a 30 bomb in the game. Of course, it did go into overtime, but I think he had 30 before the OT started. He didn't get any kills in overtime. I believe that's right. because it was basically just a 4-0 run for Fnatic in the OT. Skadoodle, in the high 20s, 27. Nothing also did pretty decent. Freakazoid and Sean Garrison obviously had a tough D2. Once again, though, it was the trio playing well. Freakazoid seems to kind of be the X factor. Like, if he can be that fourth guy that's fragging really well next to the trio, or if one of the trio is quiet, if he can fill the gap, then he can really be the deciding factor in this team's success, I feel like. When he's having a time struggling, it puts more pressure on the trio, and it's if they can handle it or not depends on whether or not Cloud9 will be successful. But yeah, and this is just a heartbreaker too, because in this game they had a 15-9 lead at one point. So they had 6 chances to close out the game in regulation. They just could not do it on the CT side. They just got caught a few times. I kind of noted when they played in a previous video when they played Envious on Dust 2, you kind of saw Skadoodle struggle holding that cat cross with the op, which is what he's known for being able to do. Most oppers are able to play that spot. You see so many, that's key for Dust 2 CT side to be able to do that. And he had one big round where he really did hold the cat pressure and long pressure effectively in regulation, and it was a big round, but he had a couple of rounds where he got caught for free, and that obviously hurts when that's happening. Also, just that mid to B attack and the B side of the map in general was something Fnatic was able to exploit quite often on their T side, and it wound up being the breaking point for Cloud9, it felt like. So yeah, it is Fnatic who wins the series 3-1, but I will just say, still, Cloud9 has a lot to be proud of here. I mean, they beat Envy, one of the top 5 teams in the world, in a best of 3, 2-0, plus the best of 1 victory in group play. Plus, they took a map off of them at the Gfinity Summer event they just played. So I think right now, head-to-head in maps against Envy, it's like 4-3 in favor of Envy. So it's a pretty good record to have against like a top team in the top 5. The way they played Fnatic in this finals, I think, was much closer, much better than what people expected. I feel like a lot of people looked at it as probably being like easy for Fnatic, so to speak, but definitely it wasn't. I mean, Cloud9 come right out the gate and steal like the best map for Fnatic on Cobblestone, and then they just kind of got straight up crushed on cash, right? There's really nothing we can say there. But then Overpass, they had a chance to win. They had a 13-8, 13-7 lead. I can't remember. Just couldn't close out the game. That heartbreaking 3v2 in the B-bomb site. You look at Dust 2, they're up 15-9. So really, it came down to mistake. Like, Cloud9 kind of beat themselves. You could call it choking. You could call it making mistakes. Whatever it was, this could have very easily have been a 3-1 in favor of Cloud9 if they could have closed out Overpass and if they win D2 in regulation there with all the map points they had. So, I mean, good God, they're just a few rounds from winning the whole event against the world's best team. So there's a lot to be proud of on Cloud9. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to harp on the couple of those mistakes that they made, and that's going to be very upsetting. I think Moses made a comment that sometimes it's more upsetting to lose close than to get blown out just because you were so close to winning, and I think that definitely is a factor here. But at the same time, there's a lot to be proud of. Yeah, there's some mistakes you need to fix, but overall, this is a great foundation. The way they played this event, if they can keep this up, they could eventually start breaking into the top 4 rankings for a while, and they could be consistently placing top 4 events going forward these next few weeks if they can keep this form right. So this is big news for NACS and just big news for the guys on this team who I know have put in so much time, so much sacrifice and effort to try to be a top team, to try to represent NA, to try to win titles or, place top 3, whatever it is. They've put so much in this event. It was really fruits of their labors come out of it. So maybe let's just talk about now Cloud9 going forward. What does this mean for them? What's the outlook going forward? Because like I said, there are a lot of lands left to play here very, very soon. And they obviously had a very good showing at this event. And I think now in hindsight, you could say this really started even just a week ago. So basically, the Spring Masters Gfinity 2 event they played, I guess, over a month ago now, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, didn't go so well. But that was their first event together as a 5. Freak had just joined the team. They didn't really have a chance to build a system around this 5. You take 5-6 weeks down the road, you look at all their online league play and tournament play, which I've talked about in the Cloud9 progression video, so I'm not going to go too much into that. And you can just see how they've built this better system. They've gotten more out the roster. They have just well-defined roles. They've gotten more out of Shroud on the T side by moving him into more entry and aggressive positions. Nothing being able to be kind of that other lurker, I feel, is a good position for him. Scootle's op has been a big factor, and then Sean's shot calling and the way he preps his teams and the way he calls games is obviously the next big factor. And you really did see signs of this at the last event. That they did get eliminated in groups. They won train against Envy, and they played a close cash game, 16-12. And then, of course, they got beat by VP. But once again, a close game there on Overpass in that best of three that they just barely lost. And then, yeah, they did get crushed on Dust too. But my point is those are the signs, right? Those are like the building blocks, our first hint at the fact that Cloud9's making an upward swing, an upward trend. And then this event just showed you how far it really can go and where they kind of sit right now. And I'll kind of just take each player at this point and talk about how they have done, what they have looked like, and basically the good points and bad points for Cloud9 going forward. So I'll start with Sean Gares, the leader for this team, the in-game leader. He does catch a lot of flack for not contributing with frags, and maybe he could contribute a bit more, but who really the hell cares? I mean, his main job is to lead this team, and he does a phenomenal job at this now. I mean, everyone, like myself, was the heaviest proponent of how it didn't seem like it worked out when you had like this leadership dichotomy between him and Simphis. There was so much conflict, and in fact, many times Sean Gares took a back seat, unwilling to say no, unwilling to take the reins and make the final call, let people speak over him too much. He didn't manage suggestions well. You always want a second voice and extra input, but the way he managed it seemed just not efficient. So now, when you look at the communications and POV streams from this tournament, and I've made this comment in some other videos I've made about this event that you can check out after the group play and things, the communication's so crisp on this team. Suggestions do come in, yes, but they're usually good insights, and Sean manages them well. He's willing to say no. Even if him saying no means they lose the round because it's not the right shot, he's still focused and dedicated, and he is the clear leader. And more often than not, he's going to make the right calls and the right reads. I mean, you can't be perfect, obviously, but at least he's taking firm leadership of the team. He owns this team. You know, he owns the game plan of the team. And you've seen Freakazoid comment on this several times in his interviews, as well as nothing. So the team is behind him. They trust him. And he does so well. He has such good reads. You can just tell the amount of preparation he's done scouting these teams and understanding their tendencies and trends and how to counter those. Just making sure his team fully understands how to play rounds and play different situations, putting them in better spots to get more production. I mean, this dude is just probably one of the best in-game leaders out there right now, I would have to say, just based on the success he's been able to get out of this team. And I mean, obviously I can't listen to a lot of the foreign language POVs, so that's kind of unfair of me to make that statement. I can only listen to English, but I mean, God, he just looks so good. And obviously he's the top in-game leader in NA right now. And I know people would say like Days might be if he ever came back, but I don't know. I mean, like Sean, good reads, good play calling. I'm just going to leave it at that. He called a phenomenal tournament, and I think he is such a great leader for this team right now. And God, they're lucky they have him, to be honest. Like he did so well calling this tournament. We'll take a look at the trio of Shroud, Scoodle, and Nothing, which is like the primary fraggers on this team results-wise. I'll start with Nothing. I've made this comment several times throughout many Cloud9 videos I've done. The Cloud9 progression video, probably the biggest one in the article that I wrote as well about them. I'll link all this stuff in the description. But his form has just been on point for the last several months. And you could see it in all the North American tournaments and league play they had done recently. I know that doesn't mean a lot when you compare it to international competition, but he was even struggling sometimes against NA teams. So, and he's had periods of time throughout his career where he's looked good, like, you know, the King of the Hill tournament that he played before the last DreamHack winner, I think it was. You know, he's had some ESEA lands where he looked really hot, but it seemed like he was really hot for a little while, and then he would, like, cool off, and then it would just be like this roller coaster ride, these waves, so to speak. But he's looked pretty damn consistent now for the last 2 or 3 months. I think it comes down really to the roles being so solidified with everyone else that he can kind of float around. He can be the lurker, but he can also take opportunities to take entries when the situation is right. He's always had really sick aim and reactions and movement. Now you're seeing him be able to really hone those and use them properly. I think he still makes a few mistakes here or there, but you're never going to be perfect. I think sometimes maybe he doesn't listen quite well enough to Sean, but once again, you're never going to be perfect. Sometimes you're going to miss calls, you're not going to hear them, or you're going to be so zoned in on what you're doing that you miss something else. I mean, that just happens. But overall, he's playing really well. Like I said, he kind of plays those lurking roles. I think the fact that all the other roles are so well set allows him to be a bit more flexible, and he's just playing good Counter-Strike right now. Like I said, part of that big trio the team has for fragging. I mean, Skadoodle, what do I even need to say? The dude's insane. He's insane with the op. I mean, yeah, he had some moments against Envy on Dust 2 where he was missing some key things with the cat cross. I think those actually happened as well against Fnatic on Dust 2, so those were two instances where I felt like maybe he had a rough time. But you look at every other map he played this tournament, out of the other maps they've played against CLG and Envy in the best of 3 and group play, and I mean, the dude's just insane. Like on CT side, he's going to lock down a spot with the op. You know, if he's anchoring a site like he does on A on Cash or what have you, he's gonna own it. He was huge as well on Cobblestone against Fnatic in the finals. You know, moving his op around and locking down sites with it. He's just so damn good. And then on T side, he can be that aggro guy. He can get picks. If you can't afford an op, okay, put a rifles in his hands. He's still gonna have an impact. I mean, he's just a damn good player. And there's really not much more need to be said. When you look at Shroud, I mean, this dude's always been phenomenal with his aim. He's always been known for his sick aim. One more note about Skadoodle is, I talked about his entering and his ability to get picks and lock down sites, but he's such a clutch player in like post-plant situations and retakes as well. I just wanted to add that little piece. When you look at Shroud, same story. Real clutch player in the late round. Now they've implemented him as more of an entry fragger on the T side, so now you can help you open up sites and areas of the map as well. So they're getting more production out of him by putting him in spots where he can use his aim to contribute to the team in bigger ways on the T side, which I think was a great adjustment that Sean made, moving him into more of those entry positions behind Freakazoid. CT side, once again, great side anchor when you use him that way, but also you can use him for other things. So, for example, Cash is the perfect example where when Skadoodle's maybe opping mid or B, it is Shroud locking down that A-bomb side, anchoring there. He also anchors Pit on Inferno, though we didn't really get to see that lately in international play. But, I mean, he can be that big side anchor for this team. Plays it so smart when he's anchoring sites and how he peaks and how he stays alive for rotations and things. But then, like Cash, once again, you see him playing these aggressive mid positions, and so he can do that for you as well. So very, very versatile rifler between being able to be quite passive when needed, but also being able to be aggressive when the time is right. So that's really cool that he can be so flexible rifling like that. And on T side, I've already mentioned being more part of the hits, getting entries, also great close round. He had so many games this tournament where he dropped in the high 20s or 30s. So, I mean, yeah, he just played lights out CS, and he's a damn good player. And then finally, Freakazoid, right? He's the biggest turnaround for this team. Obviously, at the Gfinity Spring Masters 2 event, he struggled. Kind of wrote that off because it was his first event. He had 5 or 6 weeks to prep with the team before they went to the Gfinity Summer 1 event. Once again, he struggled against Envious, particularly in that best of 3 series. Coming into this event, he played so much better. I mean, yeah, there were still some maps, like in this Dust 2 game against Fnatic, for example, where he had some struggles, but he also had some maps where he was just a key player on the team. In that Envious best of 3, he had some really key moments where he was really the difference maker. You look throughout the tournament that happened, especially on Overpass in this best of 5, though they did lose it. He had some big plays on CT to keep him in the game. He just turned things around so much for this team, and that's why he is kind of the deciding factor. Like, you can always expect a trio, Shroud, Skadoodle, nothing to probably produce for you, and Sean's shot calling always going to be there. But if Freakazoid can also have a good game, or at least just do decent, slightly above average, doesn't even have to be a monster, he relieves so much pressure off the trio to frag, and he adds to it and contributes. Like, maybe one of the trio is off, he can fill the gap. If the trio are playing well, but you're playing against a super good team who have 4 really skilled players and he can match up as well, then all of a sudden you're winning maps. And so I think like Freakazoid's fragging, in his performance level, like, really is kind of the X factor. Because like I said, I feel like you can always rely on the trio at this point, at least in their current form, unless one of them drops off at some point soon or something. Sean's leadership definitely there. So yeah, I think it does come down to his production. It is really the X factor. And I think this tournament overall, it was better more than it was great more than it was like poor or whatever. So he really did just make a huge turnaround from a week ago. And the one thing is, even if he's not fragging well, he plays his role. You know, he doesn't get discouraged. Whether or not he's playing well, statistically speaking, doesn't affect how much input he's giving. You know, being the entry fragger and owning that role. You know, getting information, causing distractions, allowing other people to come in after him and clean up easier because he's, you know, picked out people for them or done damage or whatever. Now, if he can actually frag too, because it comes to a point where if he dies every time he's first in, then obviously that's not good. But here he's actually been getting entries. He's been playing the CT side much better as well. If they can keep him where he's at, then things will go great for this team. So yeah, I'll just end with saying that this was a great event for Cloud9. It's a great moment for NACS. I've already kind of added some historical context to why that's the case. I think the outlook looks good. I think what they have is sustainable unless the form drops off on some other players sometime soon or something. They just need to patch up a few mistakes, and they just need to get better at closing games. Of course, it's not all perfect in dandelions and rainbows here for Cloud9. Their anti-ecos are still rough. I mean, they're still losing a lot of second rounds. They're losing to a lot of pistol rushes, though it was better in this finals particularly. But throughout the tournament, that's something that plagued them. Closing out rounds in the post plant still seems to be issues that they have at times that need to be patched up as well. So I think that's the biggest things, though, is avoiding losing to ecos and getting a little bit better at post-plant situations and closing out those rounds. Or closing out maps now was the only real problem they had this finals, to be honest. So you fix those things. You fix up a couple little issues where people aren't listening or maybe buying too quickly. Like I said, sometimes there's some miscommunication between Nothing and Sean that could be fixed. But other than that, the outlook looks good for this team. They should be proud. Everyone should be proud. That's an NA fan or a Cloud9 fan. They really showed up this tournament, and like I said, based on the fact on what I'm seeing and the schedule they have coming up, I think we could see some more top 4 finishes out of them as well. They're probably already ranked now in the top 10. I'd say they're like 8th place in the world right now after this, maybe even higher than that, maybe like 7th, or maybe even approaching 6th in the world based off this tournament alone and how they looked. And the form that they have right now, but now they just need some more results to add to it to own that spot or progress up the ladder even more. So yeah, that's my just kind of initial thoughts. I just watched it. I just responded to it just now. So this is just still fresh in my head. This is just my initial reaction. I didn't even really take a whole lot of time to review it. I just spit it out. So hope you enjoy, and I'll have more stuff out in the future. So follow up, subscribe, and thanks a lot.